Good afternoon, my friends and colleagues. We have here gathered the gathering of the mundane thinking of accountancy. That is, that the universal knowledge of the accounting science, economic science, and political science, and cybernetic science, and those scientific knowledge that are related to accountancy. Today, I am very honored to present a voice of this thinking and knowledge that has a vision of accountancy towards the future, that is looking for that all of us understand the importance that today has the title of accountancy. We met in the Technical and Consultancy Commission in the General Direction of Professions. This is where I met her. But today I have read her resume, that I have the resume in my hands. I am really surprised for her vast experience and knowledge and their national recognition and international recognition for her participation in accountancy, in topics of accounting science. And she will present a very interesting topic: the perspective of the future of accountancy in 2030. So I have the pleasure to read her resume. I'm not going to read it all because there's 2 pages, but the most important things in this resume: she graduated from the ITAM, the Technological Institute of Mexico, for our friends from Latin America, Europe, and ITAM. It is a university called institute that is very prestigious in Mexico. She graduated from that university. She's got a PhD, and she's a permanent professor in accountancy and also in the General Direction of Profession. She's well known for her scientific research. Her professional experience: he's director academic department of accountancy, in charge of futuristic research. She is a full-time professor, and she had given specialized courses. She has had international appointments as representative of the Mexican Institute of Public Accountants in the International Accounting Education Standard Board. This was in IFAC. I'm sorry, I'm reading too fast. And also, she has another international appointment in the International Federation of Accountants, 2006, 2012. Well, she was awarded in 2017 and 2018. She has a lot of recognitions. In the academic committee board, and among others. She's got 20 or more recognitions. Because of time reasons, we have to start. Well, she has professional recognition. The master degree for the National Association of Schools of Trade and Management. You know what we're talking about. This is the one that governs the quality of university and accountancy learning. And also, she received an award, Rafael Mancera Ortiz, granted by the College of Public Accountants in Mexico. She's been a distinguished professor. This recognition was granted by the Mexican College of Accountants. She has written a lot of books and articles. I read some of them in the General Direction of Professions, in the Technical and Consultative Commission. She's a permanent researcher. She's fully dedicated and delivering excellent results in her research work. So we're talking about a great personality that I would like you to give her a round of applause. Thank you very much, Hector and Mauricio, for the invitation. And I know that after lunch it's hard, like to be sitting. So I hope that my presentation will be agile, and I want you to take away something concrete. Even this is for accountant managers, but I represented the American bloc, also the Latin American bloc, with its specific commission, with its International Commission on Education that issued international education standards called International Education Standards. And there's a place in this committee for Latin America. I had the privilege to be there for 2 periods, and the most important things of the accounting profession were discussed. What's going to happen to us with everything that is going on, the threats in terms of technology, that many say that why we want accountancy, because we're going to be taken over by technology. But one great advantage that we should feel proud of is the capacity of the professor to anticipate and to adapt what is going to come and make the necessary changes. I haven't seen other profession in the world with these characteristics, that is so organized, globalized, and that having a representation, to have agreements with international agencies that could be responsible for many initiatives, and to be the main character in these changes and to anticipate those changes. For the ones that do not know the profession, can say many things, but the ones that we do know it, we can be sure, safe, and proud of what we represent around the world. What gives origin to the global concern of our profession? This started in the year 2000, because our main product, that are the financial statements, and what is around the financial statement, which is expert opinion, the opinions, the analysts, everything in terms of a product that we can call the star product or the top product of accountancy, is participating less in the market. But we shouldn't be afraid of that, because if we analyze marketing, all the products, they are born, they grow, they mature, and they are eliminated. So we had to reinvent ourselves, because the profession had a crisis. What are the main goal of financial statement? To serve users in the decision-making process. So the survey was conducted, and the decision makers were asked if they used financial statements, and most of them said no. This is something that we really use, like importantly. So at that time, well, it was like a red flag for everybody. Well, my top product, my main product is no longer like being important for decision makers. So we had what we call a crisis in our profession, and all the important firms in the world started to gather a group of experts to see and conduct an analysis called the SWOT at that time: strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunity. So this is what's been happening. And so they say where we stand and where we want to move in order to survive. In the information dimension, we are at that time issuing financial information. But what happens? Our accounting system, the traditional one, it's only capable of recording a transaction. It is a transactional system. And even more, in the new economy, we have a value that does not depend of transactions, intangible, reputational matters, the value of human resource, that traditionally we don't value and include them in the financial statements because they do not derive from transactions. So there was the need to start recognizing that what cannot be included in the balance sheet, we need to reflect it in other type of information. So now we're talking about moving from the financial to non-financial. So to start designing reports that would combine the financial with the non-financial to be like complementary in some way. So we see huge growth, and I'm going to talk about this, about the so-called comprehensive reports or integrate reporting. So it is not enough the financial information, so we need to report a high impact report of the non-financial and financial, and this is happening, and this is one of the great products that the profession offers, the so-called integrated report. We have always been reliable, but we need to be relevant. What does that mean? Historically, I have registered the buy of an asset at historical value, but when I value in the market, I say you have registered this at a value, historical value or replacement value with its depreciation or whatever, but this does not correspond to the market value. Therefore, there's a difference between the book value and the market value. But the problem became larger and larger. So the accountants are reliable and objective, that's very good, but they are no longer relevant because the values that they offer are not values that are associated to the values that economists have or financial people have when they conduct projects to evaluate the future values. So at that time, what it was decided is that the accounting turned to see financial and economists and conducted an analysis where they would include the accounting value with these other two, the economic and the financial values. And lastly, we used to manage, like we used to use documents, but this will no longer be possible because we are just about to be in the digital era. Everything will have to go through an information system. We cannot think linearly the transaction, the journey, the journal entry, and so forth. We need to think about databases, and when we think in databases, it's completely different as to think in a linear process. So at that time, it was decided, the future of the profession was decided. So in 2000 was that we had to move ourselves to a world of financial and non-financial, to a world of reliable but mainly relevant for the market, for users of the information, and also to move from a linear mind in terms of documents to a mind of databases where the IT system work. So this is what happened basically. So there's been 19 years now because we're talking about year 2000. So back then, mainly like certain blocks of countries in the world, Latin America, started having trouble at saying what an accountant should do, but in order to prepare an accountant in the world, there's three education models. The first one, I'm going to mention that the one that we know in Latin America is the university-based education. So what does that mean? It's that I decide that I want to be a public accountant. I enroll to a university in a BA program, and then I end that program and I got my professional certification to practice as a public accountant. This is Latin American model, but this is not what happened in the rest of the world. In any part of the world, the system is used. In most part of the world, the one that educates the accountant is a professional agency. This is what we call professional-based education. At 18 years old, I do not what to major, and I go to the university. I just enroll in a business program or whatever, and when I end, I think that, well, I start working and I like being an accountant, so I have to go back to a professional entity in order to be like examined, and this exam is designed by the profession but has to be endorsed by the government. So I do the exam, and if I approve it, I receive like the permit or the license to perform as an accountant. What's the difference between them? It's a huge difference. It's an abyss. Like in other countries, I could have studied anything, veterinarian or whatever, and then I can practice as an accountant. And in Latin America, if I didn't study a BA in accountancy, then I cannot perform as an accountant. So there are very different models, and that is why the mixed models have been created. In Mexico, for example, what US and Canada told Mexico, if you want your professionals practice in Canada and the US, since we do not have the same education model, your professionals had to be examined, so we will be like all the same. So that is why in Mexico was one of the first countries to introduce the concept of certification. But this was presented because of the sign of NAFTA of Mexico with the US and Canada.
Obviously, some other Latin American countries joined this model that was considered a mixed model, that places on the same level, college education with professional certification. So, what happened in colleges? As they said, accountants are going to change. In Mexico, at least, and I don't think Mexico is the exception, they started to call different careers, different names. It's going to be accountant for IT, administration, taxes, etc. So it is not only accountant, but we were going to be different accountants, but there was no order in the market. So each one called the profession as they pleased. So that caused that in Mexico we have more than 80 names of careers associated to accountants, and they don't have the same contents, time of studies, but at the end they grant the same license to work. All the licenses given by the government says bachelor degree as a public accountant. However, curricula are different and the quality ranges from low to very high. So we have a terrible diversity and a big issue here. There was a problem in the model because in the rest of the world, as I said, you can study anything. I study and it doesn't matter. If I prepare myself and pass the exam, I can practice as an accountant. The way to attract future students was to change the name to send the message that we're more attractive. So we had an identity problem. So how we are, how we convey the message. I don't want to put the name of accountant that much because then I can go more to finances or economy, etc. So that problem became so important that once again, but now in 2015 more or less, everybody gathered together and then what they said, we have an identity crisis. No one acknowledges what to do. No one knows. So if we use the word accountant, everybody thinks about the traditional profession. So even when we have changed, we moved, the users are not allowing for that. Ask any user to give you some attributes of accountants. They say they are not creative, boring, at an office, etc., etc. Many negative features for future generations like millennials. So then there's another effort in the profession to send a new message. So then what they said was, okay, let's give like a drawing, an illustration. This is an illustration that was given by the American Accounting Association, AAA. This is the most important association of the academia in the world. And what they said was the following. How to explain someone that doesn't know what's the accountant profession. Number one, it comes from the economic activities. And then we have transactions, different concepts, not necessarily transactions that an accountant should record. But it is not just black and white. It is not just like a computer that has a code like, okay, you put an entry here. The most important here is to provide this value to the whole activity. So we have different shades of gray and colors. So who establishes that shade? The accountant, through critical thought and a very solid education, can, through an accounting judgment, decide the shade to all these transactions or the value of these activities for different economic entities. From there, we have useful information for decision making for a more prosperous society. At the end, this simple illustration places the accountant with the most relevant professions for the society. Authorities consider right now high impact professions for the society, and we are there. They have good monitoring and surveillance by authorities, because a bad practice of these professionals will cause huge impact on the economy and people. So not all professions have this high degree of responsibility or high impact as ours. This places us in a position of a very relevant profession in the world. So, this profession is not black and white. We are a shade of grays. We need a lot of education to issue a judgment, information, and this information that we prepare with this professional judgment is used by many stakeholders. For example, for politics, regulation, audits, of course, by analysts, users of different kinds, and also the administration. At the end, everything is related to economic results. From there, we have market globalization. With the globalization of markets, it becomes really important, in order not to have crises, that we have useful, reliable, and transparent information. Market regulation depends on that. So at the core of any financial system, we have the accountancy profession. Any global profession has a single place compared to other professions. When they were asking who's going to regulate in financial markets, well, it is the accountancy, which is at the core of a financial system. That is why all market exchanges use this. That's why we decided to use a single system all over the world. They can decide in some countries to use different, but at least the exchange market will use standards that are also backed on international organizations. So this is reliable information giving stability to the financial system. At the end, it also exerts an impact on the market of capitals. The markets. You can correlate this development with the development of capital markets and therefore with economic development. This means that industrialized countries have a very solid accountancy profession. It is the basis to trigger good economic development, and that's very important. Obviously, after we created this idea of having a single information system all over the world, what happens? Well, now we have a good system. For example, the rules for small and medium enterprises. Not all markets are the same. There are some markets where you have small companies, big companies, but we decided to use a single system, coherent. And then what's next after this? Regulation. From whom? From professionals. I may want to be Mrs. Beauty and do wonderful things and have a good infrastructure. But if the most important stakeholders that are accountants are not prepared, it's useless to have information rules. Why? Because it is not easy to do so. As you know, just reading financial information standards, then interpret it and apply it properly will change at each economic environment. That's why there are no rules. We have assumptions, and this is very difficult because I need to understand the context, the economic context, the economic operation, and the company, the industry where you apply this in order to make that judgment, to know what the shade is. Talking about the gray shades. And this is where we have the need to regulate the profession. So we start seeing like a cascade at international level that we know as global convergence. Who are the two big organizations that regulate our profession? We have the IASB, which is in charge of finances, and on the other side we have IFAC that issues auditing standards for the public sector, the ethics code, but also we have international standards, international education standards. Well, now we need to educate accountants in the same way all over the world. This entity, regulating entity, that's the Education Board, issues only 8 standards. When these standards were created, they said, this is it. And the board was dissolved. This board is not existing anymore. It was created only to create these 8 standards and create this convergence. Competences are in 3 standards. All of us are familiar with them. Have you ever read them? Okay. Standard number 2, which is technical competences, states what an accountant should know. It divides the history of accountants into initial professional development and then continuous professional development. Initial is when you start studying accountancy until you obtain your certification from the authorities to practice, to start your practice. That's the initial professional stage. Once you have your license, then you have the continuous professional stage. And there's a big difference. In Latin America, I am given my certification or license when I graduate. But for example, in France, when they become partners of an international auditing firm, that's when they receive their license. So just imagine there's a huge difference between one model and the other. So there are big differences again. So this education international standard try to do the following. They call it like the qualification point or scoring. The accountant should know what standards state. Now, talking about technical competences, they need to know about reports, government, risk management and control, law, finances, technology, taxes, businesses, auditing, assurance, economy, administration, and strategies. That's a technical part. Now let's talk about skills, personal, intellectual, and organizational skills, and then values, ethics, values, commitment, principles, and skepticism. So these standards, number 1, 2, 3, and 4, they are divided. Number 5 is professional experience. What's the complication of these standards? What I'm going to ask professionals are competences, professional competences, not knowledge. A competence, it's the addition of competences, skills, values, and experience. So I cannot ask someone to have a competence which is very high if they have never worked. For example, if they don't have professional experience, even when they are the best students, if they don't have professional experience, they were not able to develop some skills. The importance of these standards is that they cover technical competences, techniques, values, and also with professional experience. What's important here? Lately, the most important competence for ourselves is the one which is focused on technologic competences. This technological competence has these 3 parts that I mentioned: the technical competence, skills, and also attitude. In the technical competence at worldwide level, it was stated that those are the technical competences for an accountant: analyze processes, improvements, apply technologies efficiently with data, analysis, information, and communication. Skill, assess data, critical thought, and get advice when needed. Polyphacetic issues. Well, these competences have just been published about a year ago. At worldwide level, they came to the agreement that these should be technological competences. Why? Because they want accountants to be programmers? Well, up to where an accountant should be an expert in IT. Well, when not, when they need to call for an expert to resolve some IT problems. But we shouldn't believe that we're going to call experts for everything. If that happens, what's our added value? So yes, we need to cover some technological competences, but at a proper level for the value that we have always given to others. Which one is generating useful, reliable information for decision making. So, focused on this, we need to know what's the technological knowledge level. Then demonstrate commitment with learning, monitoring, time management, challenges, open-minded, awareness on biases, and reflect on experiences. At a forum, someone said, and the accountant profession, is it now better or worse than 30 years ago? On one hand, we. Sorry, there's no audio.
No audio. Sorry. There's no audio. No te preocupes. So we included the reasonable value concept that we all know. And the question is, and with the inclusion of the reasonable value, are we better? Who thinks that we're better? So everybody thinks no? Okay. So some of you would say yes, it's better because those are values that give us like to be the closest to the market value. But some others can say that is the foundation of the value is fragile. If it's not hierarchy 1 or 2, it falls in hierarchy 3. I don't know. We don't know how valid the foundation of this value. So we fall in a judgment field and the bias field. So today in this profession, it is very important to do an exercise in order to know that we are not biased when we issue an opinion or a judgment. So bias, personal and organizational bias, takes relevance, and also to reflect on the experiences and future actions. On the side of values becomes essential. So we have an inquisitive, we are curious and thinking, critical thinking. So again, today, where the soft skills, it would be like essential in our future. Of course, the technical part that we saw, and also the skills development to have values, but as a whole, this technical competence with these abilities and values will allow me to have competences of critical thinking and professional judgment. There's a study about digital competences. This study was conducted by Institute of Management Accountants, and basically, well, has to do with this graph. One of the things that I mentioned that we should know, think linearly and think based on a database. And we think how an IT system has three main parts. The first one is how the data are created, where the information comes from in a system. This comes from business activities, and those activities comes from customers, and from there we have transactions that should be stored in the system, and these transactions should have a format that I can clean and allowing me to submit them, and those are introduced in the supply chain or the value chain of businesses, and decisions are made regarding the value proposal of the company. This is the cycle or circle of data: creation, storage, and decision making. in data management, we have data science included, and this is very well related to ourselves and our future. Why? Because as you can see, data science is made of three parts. The first one is the intersection between information, statistics, analysis, and business decisions, and this is like the intersection of the three. If we join this to the data flow, the storage, and the transformation, we have the right part of the slide. We have data creation, storage of data, and business decisions. So we move this to include it in this graph, and what we have is this. What the technology will do will automate the model. So where's the accountant and where's the auditor? Because it's been said that in XBRL, where the transaction is coded, an auditor is no longer required. Because when we use blockchain or chain, the one that we have in bitcoins, and all the documents will have this traceability or this transparency. So if nobody can move the blockchain, why do I need an auditor that would tell me that this is okay? If blockchain works as it should, you know that nobody can change it. So this is where it is demonstrated that what technology and platforms do is to eliminate the middleman. So, for example, what happened with travel agencies? When we travel, we use the travel agencies, and then we have the IT platforms. If I can go directly log in to buy my trip, why do I want a travel agency? So what did travel agencies do? So they had to transform themselves, and now they tell you if you can choose whether to go in on your own, but if you want, I can organize all your trip and I will get you better prices. So at the end, someone can choose to not to use a travel agency. Others will choose for them, but they need like to have a value added. And if we are just the middleman, like between the company and the SAT, the SAT, and the SAT does not want a middleman anymore because we have the e-billing, e-invoicing that go directly to the SAT, which is like the Mexican IRS. So now we have the money laundering, the prevention of money laundering. We have corporate governance. We have this and that. Okay, so traditional work areas will be closed, but other niches are open that gives like more value added. When we used to have one that with less value added can be substituted by technology, but we have another one that is an area of opportunity with more value added. So this is what we need to do in regarding the model automation. What are the digital specific competencies that are required to accountants? We know about storing and transformation of data, management of databases, and also a language to visualize and analyze data. There are many powerful languages to visualize and analyze data. So we can no longer issue our traditional information. We have now ways of doing this very visually, where the customer don't have like doesn't have a static information, can be doing like simulations with visualization and analysis of data, the initial professional development, and then we have the continuous professional development. What happened? As accountants, we need to be updated for like during our whole life. So in some fora that I have been to, they have asked if it's mandatory or not to be professional. If I get the scores or I don't get them, what will happen? Well, the thing is that we need it. It is not that it's mandatory or not, but we need to time for updating. Even if we do not get a like a score, it is just a personal matter. The speed at which we are going forward requires our transformation and the logical part that needs a lot of hours to know the minimum like requirements. There are already firms, and this came out from the Accounting Today of 2019, classified as the best accounting firms in the cloud. So those are firms that do not exist physically. All of them are in the cloud. They do not have like a physical office. So if you can see, they are all new to me. Before I read this article, I didn't know these firms are small and medium and large size. We have all sizes here. So what it's well, since the software and technology are based in cloud, the software is the least of the concerns. I have the software. So the important things are the communication problems, or problems of culture, and a proper recruiting process. So I have the software. So how I'm going to create a culture when I do not even know the people? I haven't been physically in the same place. So this makes our traditional skills be modified significantly. So some concerns of the firms that are based on the cloud say, the compatibility of softwares, how to protect information of the customers, how to escalate the idea of a virtual company, the life-work balance. If not, I'm connected 24 hours a day, how to manage the equipment and how to have transparency, but at the same time protect privacy. Because now this is a problem, and we see that in how many things you can to put in certain places. So there's no line between privacy and transparency. So we have other challenges faced and the skills we need to have. So the challenges will have to do with problems that we never anticipated before, the management of remote equipment, 100% virtual, and also the capability of monitoring something that is remote. So as if we see everything that is happening in our profession, who wouldn't be concerned about talking about this cultural change we need? So you are a consortium of associated firms to add value. So we're talking about the ability of having this flexibility and at the same time provide value to a name as a whole. But if there's no quality, any one of the network will affect others. So this is very serious because this is an intangible. So we say that it should have certain characteristics on how the network is affected. So we should have rules, and this is very difficult, and this is only can only be achieved with culture and measurements. So why are we changing? Number one, because of the market demand, because of regulation, digitalization, generational changes, customer demand, and there's very few that we need that they say that we shouldn't evolve. So, they are sure they're sure that we need to evolve. Also, number one, the one that we talked about, the IT first relationship, built relationship, advisory, industry experience, and project management. Those are the ones that are needed. And also, the dollar has not been enough to make companies change. Everybody's concerned, but the speed of that change, it is not big enough. So many of the procedures conducted by accountants have like little value in this system. So we need to recognize this, that the change must come from the top. While some people say that technology is an overhead and they want to know who this can be charged to, but we need to think of it as a strategic asset, and this is part of the business model. So the profession cannot wait for more, and the new agenda is to add finances, the part of technology, and the part of information. So really, the trend of the CFRS, all the auditing standards, have included this connection between finance, the management of information, and technology. So the profession moved the positioning of what we should do. So it placed us in the most important part of the economy, which is economic development. It already issued the standards required. What is missing? So the actors that are individuals get on board and to see everything that has been issued in education mainly and technological competencies as well, and we see where we can be substituted, where automation can make our services lose value. But on the other hand, how we can leverage this if we are a network, an international network, the cloud and the cultural management become essential. So we expect to issue professional judgment with integrity, independence, and skepticism. This is the essential value of the profession. When there's been a big financial scandals, the first thing they say was where was the accountant, if there was an expert opinion so issued, so what happened. So we need to continue with the part of integrity and make and ensure to others that what we do has the decision center on judgment with all the values with which we have been educated. And we need to develop critical thinking. We need to go to the value chain, but in a much more value-added focus. Use a system to professional judgment, where we need to have much more tools on how to define a problem, how to collect the data associated to the problem, analyze it, issue an opinion, and document it. And this will work for everything, because the questioning will be, and why you evaluate this in this way, why you revealed it in this way, and why you as auditor said that this was okay. So We knew what was the problem. We knew what were the alternatives. We analyzed them. We assessed them. We made a reasoned decision, not a biased one, and we documented it. If we do the same thing in the services processes, we will do okay. But if we do something because we have always done this in this way, we will no longer be adding value. This is the protection of assets, real-time decision making, risk management. Obviously, those are areas of opportunity. In valuation, we need to get closer to finances. The worst thing that can happen in order to audit any item of the financial statements, we have to ask someone else for help. So this would be like really serious. So we do need experts, but not to solve everything. So all the items of the balance sheet and financial statements are very hard to reveal, evaluate, and audit.
So we need to get on board this. Which is our value then? Being reliable, that's a value. Design the future combined with experience and integrity. At the end, it is a series of requirements. We should have vision, of course, competences, but beyond that, we should arrive to the creativity and vision for the company that we're serving. And yes, we are still doing like the traditional teas. There is a very important professional for companies mentioned that has a T shape. Why T shape? Because they have strategic, wide thinking, but they know how to resolve problems. Again, how do we resolve things? And then I can say, I don't know, or I lack the technical knowledge. And this shouldn't happen. We should be robust in our techniques, but also with strategic thoughts and capable of managing complexity, risk, issue, a professional opinion, being interdisciplinary, and know to apply the standard to particular situations and contexts, and issue quantitative and qualitative reports. That's the vision for the future accountant. Being capable of having strategic thought applied to the context, and of course manage complexity and diversity present in all transactions of nowadays. So we should move from traditional services to value added services. We already mentioned some of them, and also value creation services. This is a long part, but I just have 1 minute? 5 minutes, okay. So we should issue value added reports with qualitative and quantitative information. These reports should cover an explanation on how the company creates value for others, that's the organization created value, saying how the system interconnects with the business model. This business model dictates how all capitals interact, risks. Here, it depicts how the capitals enter to the uh, enterprise company, intellectual, finance, human, how they transform into the business model and how they are the output of the business model, external environment, risks, and strategy, resource allocation, and performance scoring or assessment. And also explain intangible things of the company. What's the riskiest part of a financial statement? Probably circulating, non-circulating, or current, not current capital, endorsements, and the risk increases as the long-term assets increase, and the riskiest is intangible assets. Less those that are recorded, but much more those that are not recorded due to their high volatility. So, if we are in a market of capitals and we ask what's the basket of assets, we could do this with investments in work capital assets, fixed and intangible assets. At the end, all this is related with the different values that we use at the IRFS, the rescue value, the settlement, replacement, or a reasonable value. What we have done is moving from continuous use value to reasonable values that, of course, are not yet market values in full. But we have moved to this. And then thinking about the business model and the going concern value. And we have the famous proposals like the balancing scorecard that state that everything starts with the intellectual capital of companies. This capital is impacted in perspectives, giving a value proposal to the customer, and this adds value to the company. So all this has the sequence intellectual value that impacts processes, and then value proposals and value proposals in the value of the company. All this model has to be reflected in the way we issue the information. At the end, and this is very important, if I am investing in intangible assets, but these assets are not permeating the business model, these intangible assets will end up in losses for the company. A way in which we can create value is precisely by being more explicit in the operation of this whole system by means of the reports. The information, but for our users, we have primary information and then decisions. We need to help decision makers to create reports to make proper decisions. So our fundamental goal will be translating the information, not structured, because it is not structured, and then translate it into knowledge. We are always in the information value chain industry. What happens nowadays? There's a lot of non-structured information. If there is a professional capable of structuring this information in the form of knowledge for decision-making processes, all these services are those that are needed precisely for today and the close future. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doctor. Please, Alma Rebecca Starga, will you please hand out the participation diploma for the doctor. Remember your questions. You can write them down and upload it on our website. This is so no questions? Okay, so now we will hand out our special recognition to Dr. Silvia Meljem Enriquez de Rivera for her valuable participation as a speaker in this 20th Annual Worldwide Conference 2019 held at El Diplomático Hotel on October the 7th. It is our honor to give you this recognition. Thank you. Additionally, the firm has a special present for you. This is art craft, which is Olinala. That's a secret of a chest that preserves aroma or scent of the wood. This is done in Guerrero State.